Hey guys, Sean here and welcome to the F1 Word. Now back in July, the FIA announced that its Halo device would be mandatory from 2018 onwards and must be fitted onto all Formula One cars. Around 20 minutes after that announcement, I decided to sit in front of a microphone and throw down a rant that was very hot-headed and, to be fair, pretty ill-informed if I'm being completely honest. In that video, I threw around all kind of statements and all kind of numbers that I'd seen in British media, which, as we know, guys, is highly reliable. And as I say, the whole thing was pretty ill-informed. Now, in my defense at the time, there was not a lot of information out there. The FIA hadn't really told us a lot, and it wasn't until a few weeks down the line that data and information started to be released. Over the last few weeks and months, we've seen a lot more of the Halo on the cars, and we've been given a lot more information by the FIA, so I thought the right thing to do was for me to go back, do a ton of research, and start to put some facts together, rather than just a massively, heavily ranted opinion. So in this video, I'm going to look at some of the facts put forward by the FIA, the information they've given, a little bit of a timeline, and then towards the end I'm going to give my opinions on the Halo and then let you guys know if it has changed at all. One thing I claimed during that rant video was that the Halo was a knee-jerk reaction to the Jules Bianchi accident at Japan in 2014. That was completely false, and for that, guys, I absolutely apologise. The project actually started in 2011 when it became evident to the FIA that the cars had progressed in terms of safety to a point where the most vulnerable part of the car was the driver's head. The GPDA, and that's the Grand Prix Drivers Association, of course, they expressed support for cockpit protection and wanted it pushing through as quickly as possible. And that was followed up by two letters that were signed by all the drivers on the grid at the time in December 2015 and July 2016, and that was sent to the FIA president, and they were asking for head protection to be introduced as well. Initially, after this, the FIA came up with a wide range of devices. I think they said around 10, and they were all considered, and that included like frontal roll bar, full canopies, and of course the Halo, aero screen, and shield. And of course, as we know, eventually it was those three that were shortlisted by the FIA as the best options. Initially, the FIA felt that the aero screen was actually the most complete solution and actually considered it the most promising as well. However, it came to a point where they got a deadline and they had to make a decision, and the only one out of all of those three that was able to pass its crash testing was the Halo. So at that point, the Halo was the most complete device. And that crash test, by the way, was to ensure that the head protection could withstand a 20-kilo wheel assembly, I think it was, being thrown at a 15-degree angle at 225 kph at the device. Some pretty hefty forces in there. The other problem the FIA had with the aero screen and the shield were a number of external issues, I guess you could call it, or environmental issues, even that. And that was including dirt, rain, fogging, and driver dizziness, which was reported by Sebastian Vettel at Silverstone this year. So after the FIA had sat down and come to the conclusion that the Halo was the correct device moving forward, they then went into what they called a risk assessment phase. A lot of red tape. Good red tape in this case, it needs to be done, of course, but they analysed a number of real-life F1 accidents, and they broke them up into three categories that were car-to-car contact, car-to-environment contact, and external objects. They also assessed other possible risks, which includes extrication from the car and, of course, driver visibility. So coming up on screen now then are three separate lists, one from each category, of all the incidents the FIA analysed and their eventual findings. Important to note at this point that the phrase positive on balance essentially means whether positive outweighs the negative or the neutral. In the case of car-to-car contact, then you can see there, out of all of those, only one was considered neutral, and that was Schumacher and Liuzzi at the 2010 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. A terrifying accident when you watch it back. Absolutely terrifying. Schumacher there, millimetres from a serious injury, if not death. But despite how close it was, the FIA obviously felt in that one, the Halo would probably have made no difference. By the way, I will say after all of these lists, there will be some pictures of some of these accidents from each categories, but I will just emphasise right now, there will be no graphic images of any incident that contained or caused a fatality. As you can see on that list though, guys, some pretty huge accidents, and the most recent one in Formula One that was analysed was the 2015 Austrian Grand Prix, where of course Fernando Alonso flew over the top of Kimi Raikkonen's car, narrowly missing his head. And actually the one that still makes me cringe thinking about it is the Wirtz and Coulthard one, not to mention of course the 2012 Belgian Grand Prix incident. With regard to car to environment contact, you can see there again some huge accidents in this, and unfortunately some of them, as we know, fatalities. And as you can see, they're actually analysing incidents right up until the 2017 Monaco Grand Prix. That incident, of course, with Pascal Wehrlein and Jenson Button, which actually left Pascal Wehrlein resting on the barrier by his head. Back to my rant video in July then, and I stated in that the FIA were claiming that Jules Bianchi would have been saved by the halo, or there would have been a positive result of the halo involved. The FIA have never ever claimed that, and again guys, I can only apologise. Like I said, it was a hot-headed and ill-informed rant. The fact of the matter is the FIA have made it clear that their analysis showed that the outcome was neutral and that the forces involved were beyond the capabilities of the halo. Now, to me, that would be a negative, but they've decided to go with neutral, but they've confirmed there that this is not as a result of the Jules Bianchi incident and it would not have saved his life. And of course, on that list, as you can see, guys, some absolutely enormous accidents. Luciano Burti's accident, which still feels like it happened yesterday at the 2001 Belgian Grand Prix. A horrible accident. Of course, Maria Di Vellotta's as well. And, as I said, most recently, Pascal Wehrlein. They also analysed incidents from F3, GP2 and F3000. Finally then, on their list of analysis are the external objects, and these are the most significant. As was confirmed by the FIA back in Hungary this year, following all the criticism they got, they came out in a press conference and they gave all this information out. I will link that in the description, guys. But they confirmed then that the halo was predominantly designed with Henry Surtees' accident in mind in 2009 at the F2 race in Brands Hatch. And having watched that accident personally, the halo would have saved his life. It's as simple as that. Another big factor in the halo's design was the 2009 Hungarian Grand Prix, where Felipe Massa was of course hit on the head by a spring. We will come on to small objects in a moment, but that is not as cut and dry as maybe it would appear with the positive on balance statement. But during the development of the halo and following Justin Wilson's accident in IndyCar in 2015, the geometry was altered so it could cope with that kind of accident. Ultimately, whether you feel it would have saved him or not, or what the FIA findings were, the halo certainly wouldn't have made things any worse. So even in, say, a 50-50 situation, not necessarily Justin Wilson, but even in a 50-50 situation, you'd have to say that it's better to have the halo than not to have the halo. As that age-old saying goes, it's better to be safe than sorry. Another statement from the FIA that is important to understand is that they are fully aware and have said it themselves that they know the halo is not perfect and is not 100% guaranteed. As I said there, with Felipe Massa's accident in mind, they did actually go back and look at smaller objects and how effective the halo would be in those situations. The FIA, and I'm going to quote this, threw millions of small objects at the car fitted with the halo, and that was to determine how effective it would be. The number is not spectacular. I criticised it in another video. It is 17%. That is a very, very low number, but the fact is, whether it's 17% or 97%, the halo does reduce the number of small objects capable of hitting a driver. It's also important to note that following Massa's accident, visor and helmet strength and integration were all improved massively, and there is another step forward coming in that in 2019, and that's going to be higher standards for the helmets and the visors. So with all that data in mind, guys, there was absolutely no choice for the FIA. They had to push on with the halo. 19 out of the 21 examples were positive or positive on balance. Other areas of concern that the FIA addressed included visibility. Up to the point of recording this video, as far as I know, all teams and almost all drivers on the grid have run the halo at some point, and apparently the majority of drivers' feedback is that visibility is quote-unquote substantially unaffected and there is no significant visual obstruction due to the central pillar. Initially, some drivers did express feelings of claustrophobia almost, but have all said that they would essentially get used to that with the revised field of view. The FIA are also going to go around all circuits and make sure that flags and marshals posts and all the flashing light boxes are at a visible height for the driver. So whether they're higher or lower, I don't know, but the FIA are going to address that concern as well. With regard to visibility, and interestingly enough, compared to LMP1, the halo actually gives a greater field of view. So in LMP1, there are basically strict rules that teams must adhere to with regard to the field of view when designing their cars. And as I say, with the halo fitted, a Formula 1 car actually has a greater field of vision. Despite that though, and despite their comfort with that issue, the FIA are still conducting tests on trying to make the central pillar narrower. They are going to test it and see if they can get it from the current 20mm to a minimum of 16mm. So although they're happy with it, they're going to try and make it even easier for the driver to see and get rid of any concerns over visibility. With regard to drivers getting out of a car or being removed from a car following a major accident, the FIA have tested all sorts of devices, including a hinge mechanism and even explosive bolts, but in the end felt that the driver could get out of or be removed from the car in all situations without need for these mechanisms, and that includes being removed with their seat. With regard to a car being tipped upside down, as we saw with Fernando Alonso last season in Australia, of course, the FIA have carried out a number of tests and actually found that because the car rests partially on the halo, the drivers have a bit more room for manoeuvre and actually have an easier route out of the car than they currently do. Despite this, the FIA's preferred procedure, as it has been for a very long time, is for the car to be turned back onto its wheels and the driver to get out that way. And apparently all drivers are perfectly happy with their ability to get in and out of the car and their space to do so, we'll say. However, they have all asked for training similar to that of the exercise carried out by the FIA so that they know what to do if their car does end up upside down with the halo attached. Whether that's already been carried out, I don't know, but I'd imagine it's quite easy for the FIA to do. Now, obviously, the halo is structural and completely attached to the car, so removing it is an issue. Now, although the FIA did not find any instance where they would need to remove the halo, they felt it was probably best to be prepared for such a case. So what they've devised is effectively a small version of the jaws of life that the emergency services use that will sit in the back of the medical car and will cut through 3 specified points on the halo for it to be removed should it need to be. So to summarise the FIA's position, I guess they feel the halo meets its safety objective. The risk assessment study shows the halo provides a safety benefit. The driver's feedback regarding visibility is generally positive. The revised extrication process has been devised and is currently being rehearsed ready for next season. It, of course, therefore, will be mandatory from 2018 onwards. As far as I'm aware, it is going into F2 next season, but it's going to take a number of years for it to filter down to other categories. It's actually Charlie Whiting that said that it will take many years for it to reach all the way down to the lowest category of motorsport. And to give an example, he did say that Formula 3 is currently following 2010 F1 rules with regard to crash testing and safety. 2 more areas to look at then, guys, and they are aesthetics and cost. Now, aesthetics are an important part of Formula 1. If they weren't, then the new 2017 regulations to make the cars look more aggressive and more attractive would never have been introduced. However, safety is paramount, and that is that. As much as I hate the look of the hideous thing, it is more important that the drivers are safe, and I absolutely agree with that now. And to be fair, during my rant video, I did at the time, I was just so angry that they've come up with such a disgusting thing that I looked past that. We were actually having this discussion in Discord the other day, and I actually posted 2 pictures on the server whilst I was talking to 2 of the lads, and it took both of them quite a while to even notice the halo on the car with the redesigned liveries of those 2018 cars. So, in my opinion, once the teams have got their hands on these halos and are allowed to paint them what colour they want, stick some sponsors on it and hang some aero from it, we're probably going to get a much better looking thing than the current carbon fibre hoop. It's still not going to look great, but it's going to look a damn sight better than it does right now. And let's not forget, guys, ultimately, we will get used to it. Look at the 2014 car noses, that horrible Ferrari, those... let's call them gentleman appendage noses. They were absolutely disgusting. The step noses of the past, the Viking horns, all these aerodynamic parts hanging off the car at every corner. Some of them were ugly as hell. But within 5 or 6 races, we'd completely forgotten about them and hardly noticed them anymore. That's kind of what's going to happen with the Halo, I feel. We'll moan about it for the first few races, but then something will happen somewhere and we'll just completely forget about it and move on. You just kind of have to get used to it. There's nothing we can do about it. The other concern was the cost. Now, there's not a lot on the internet about this, actually, and it's quite a grey area. So I did some digging around some German newspapers and some Spanish newspapers. Google Translate is a magnificent invention. And from what I understand, each Halo device will set the teams back $30,000, and that is per unit, and the teams will need initially a minimum of 3, and that's 1 for each car and 1 for crash testing. So Formula 1, Formula 2 and Formula E will purchase them from an external supplier and it will cost them $30,000 per unit. And despite the fact the FIA are pushing this through and making it mandatory, they are not subsidising for it at all. So have my opinions on the Halo changed? Well, aesthetically, no. I still think it's absolutely hideous and it just doesn't look as though it has any place on a Formula 1 car. However, as I've said in this video a couple of times, safety is absolutely paramount, and even if that Halo only saves 1 life, it's already done its job and it's already justified its existence. It still looks very half-baked in my opinion, kind of as if the FIA is saying we want to keep this open cockpit, but actually we also need to add head protection, so this will do. I would much rather see a fully enclosed cockpit if they're going to go down that route than have the halo, but at the moment it is the most complete option, and that's the one the FIA are pushing ahead with. They have said they will continue to look at other options and at improving the halo, but the current halo remains the most complete solution at present. The majority of fans, and I know a lot of you guys, a lot of my subs, a lot of you on Discord, absolutely hate the halo and do not want it in Formula 1. But I have to say, a lot of people I've spoken to recently that I also spoke to when it was first announced have changed opinions a little bit. They still don't like it, but they look at it and say, well, you know, it's not the worst thing in the world. At least the FIA are trying to keep these drivers safe. And I think a lot of that comes, certainly for me, from the release of all this information and data that they did earlier in the year, or a good month after the halo was initially announced. Had this information been released immediately, I think a lot of people's opinions would have been maybe not different, but would have certainly been a lot more informed than certainly I was in that Halo rant video. So no, I don't like it, and I still feel there are as many negatives to the Halo as there are positives. But taking into account all of that FIA data, all of that analysis and all of that information, it's very hard to argue against its implementation in the sport. But what do you guys think? Has your opinion changed on the Halo at all? Do you still absolutely hate it? Are you warming to it? Or are you just a little bit like me, accepting the fact that we're just going to have to get used to it? Let me know your opinions in the comments down below. Apologies guys if this video's gone on a little bit longer than it usually would do. I just wanted to get all the facts out there that I possibly could and address my shortcomings in my original Halo rant video. I will be back later in the week with more content, of course, and don't forget to join us this Sunday at 7 PM UK time for our weekly live stream. This week, it is, of course, Abu Dhabi Grand Prix reactions, and there will be a debate in there as well that I'm going to let you guys decide on in Discord. If you want to join us in Discord, follow the links in the description below. Also follow me on social media. Links to all of that are in the description as well. But as ever, guys, thank you so much for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.